Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to Community Compute. It's been a while since I've released a video, but I thought today was the day. Rolling with the service desk headset today, but it's just temporary. I'm getting my audio situation sorted out, but I didn't want that to hold me back from putting out a video. So today I want to talk about Ubuntu, specifically Ubuntu 24.10 Oracular Oriole, and I want to do a bit of a review of it. And the reason for that is I've been using Linux for about 2 years now, and curiously, I kind of skipped Ubuntu. I never really used it. So I wanted to give it a fair shot, see what it was all about, and yeah, share my experience with you here. So let's get into it. All right, recording interrupted by a crying baby, but we're all good now. So Ubuntu 24.10 ships with a relatively recent kernel, so 6.11 kernel family there. Should really help running the latest and greatest hardware like framework laptops, things like that. So that's definitely a pro right out of the gate. And then next up, a very notable feature is that 2410 ships with Gnome version 47, and obviously that includes a whole slew of upgrades, one of which is very visual. So Ubuntu did have accent colors before, but now they've kind of defaulted to the upstream version of accent colors, which is built into Gnome now. So that's enabled for all GTK apps. It does provide a nice bit of visual pizzazz. You can see in my script here, this is LibreOffice, right? If I highlight text, my accent color is shown. I've even noticed that it works quite well even in older, or apps I should say, which use an older version of GTK. So if I pull up like FileZilla, for example, you can see it's very prominent, right? When I highlight the directory or a file, you can see my chosen accent color appears there. So very well integrated, even in older GTK apps. Have to say I really like it. It's nice. Most of the other improvements that come along with GNOME 47 are not necessarily visual in nature. We've got performance and rendering improvements. I think for NVIDIA hardware, Wayland is now the default session, which is big, especially for NVIDIA gamers. Other things that I could show, though, would be, for example, in the Nautilus file manager, really, or anywhere in the system, modal dialogues this is just such a small change. I don't even think it's worth mentioning, but I will. Modal dialogues across the system now have these little rounded corners. Nice, it looks good. But more importantly, in Nautilus, if I go to my network section, this was actually revised with GNOME 47. It shows your history. So if you've connected, if you want to use your file manager to connect to remote hosts, remote systems, this actually is a pretty good convenience feature. I can see historical connections I've made. This one's to my home server via SFTP. I use it to just like plop files in the server for my Jellyfin app I have running there. But it could be for anything. Supports any sort of major protocol, Samba, WebDAV, SSH. You know the drill. Now moving on to Steam. So Ubuntu claims that the Steam Snap has seen some major performance improvements. I believe via updated Mesa PPAs, some low latency kernel settings, things like that. So yeah, I put it to the test. I couldn't really tell a difference. I generally don't use the Steam Snap, but I did use it just for the purposes of this video. I wanted to check it out. This is the Steam Snap running here, but I actually ran some tests for you, which I'll show. I think you might find them interesting. Okay, so this is by no means scientific, but let me get myself out of the way here. You'll notice that here I've got the Steam client running as a deb, so using the Steam installer apt package, and you can see frames rendered just over 20,000, and then average FPS 128. And again, we're not going to get into like the granular details, but just judging from this, here we're running the same game, same benchmark as the Steam Snap, and slightly lower average FPS, slightly lower total frames rendered. You can look at this, in detail if you want, but seems like it's roughly on par, maybe a little worse. Just I'd still probably prefer the deb package. I did just want to put it to the test a little bit there. Okay, moving along. 24.10 also introduces a new version of apt, which is interesting. This one actually does have some visual changes. So this is version 2.98 based on my research. And you will notice when performing things like system upgrades or updates, you'll get a nicer, kind of more visual representation of what's actually changing. So let me run an upgrade now, and you'll see that in action, right? So I can clearly see what I'm upgrading, what will be changed. Not that much different, but it's a little bit more cleaner in the way it presents information to you. Not quite on the level of like DNF, but it's a nice change nonetheless. Then we've also got a new system level GUI app called Security Center, which you can see here. I'll pop that open. What this is effectively kind of how I see it is essentially like Flat Seal for snaps. It's a permissions manager specifically for snaps, confined snaps, that is. And it's experimental. It's an opt-in beta feature, but it just allows you more fine-tuned granular control over the permissions that your Snap apps have. So I actually have it turned off. I personally wouldn't want to use it. I do use some snaps, and I'll explain kind of where I see the use case for snaps in just a minute. But let me turn this on, and what we'll do is it'll kind of run, do its thing. And then when I open an app for the first time, it will prompt me for permissions. So in this version, I believe, this is the beta version as I mentioned, the only permission it really handles so far is access to the home folder, but you can see that kind of expanding. You know, Flatpak as a packaging standard has all these permissions built in and even more. You can control by the command line. You might be familiar with Flat Seal, which is GUI for that to control those. This, again, I kind of see this as a Flat Seal for Ubuntu, but it's first party, right? So got my folder permissions. Let me go ahead and open an app like Firefox. And let's see, my Firefox is running as a snap. I'm thinking if maybe I go and in the Firefox snap, try to upload a file, it might ask. There we go. So want to access my home directory here, select a file through Firefox. You see here's the Security Center notification. Kind of tells me about the app, publisher, Mozilla. I trust them, obviously. But yeah, so I can give Firefox read access to everything in the desktop folder, the requested folder only, allow always, allow once, deny once, all the usual stuff. It's nice, a GUI version of permissions prompting. I do see this as a positive. I'm not a huge fan of snaps personally, but it's a nice welcome addition. So before I jump into the more in-depth explanation of snaps, I figure I'd mention the retro startup sound. So there's some Easter eggs in this version of Ubuntu because it's the 20th anniversary version. So if we take a look at appearance, they've included some retro wallpapers. This is a throwback. This brown one's a throwback to Warty Warthog, I think. There's the retro startup sound. Man, that thing slaps, doesn't it? Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, snaps and just general critiques of Canonical that I've seen. So, if you just go peruse Reddit or any other forum where Linux users hang out or prospective Linux users, you might see a lot of negative press, negative posts and such about Canonical, especially about Ubuntu, forcing snaps, a general preference for other packaging formats like Flatpak. And, I have to admit, before deciding to give Ubuntu a try, I shared those opinions, in my case, probably without foundation because I had never really tried Ubuntu and kind of looked and checked out what snaps are all about. But what I found is it's really not that way. You can remove snaps with a few commands if you really don't like them. You can use Ubuntu perfectly fine without snaps. And then one thing I thought I'd mention is that the App Center, so this graphical App Center, let me shrink myself down again. This graphical App Center in Ubuntu, it actually allows you to search. Maybe this wasn't the case historically, but at least as of 24.10, probably with 24.04 as well. If I search, say, GIMP, for example, I can search for both snap packages as well as debs. So it's not like locking me out of debs, right? I can still install debs even from the GUI manager or snaps. So it supports both. I think originally at some point with this new Flutter UI, maybe that wasn't the case, but they listened to feedback and they have added it. So you have full access to debs from the GUI, obviously from the terminal you do, with some caveats, I have to say, quite annoying caveats. And then the other thing, what I see as kind of goodwill to the community is this particular App Center actually allows you, so let's go to like Chrome, for example. Let's go download Chrome. I believe they offer a deb. Yeah, 64-bit deb here. So if I download that, We have that annoying security thing. I'll have to disable that after this call. But here we go. So I've got this deb just downloaded. Now if I double click that, obviously I could install that from the command line, but if I double click it, um, I can actually open that with the Software Center. So it's actually a GUI for deb files as well, which is actually kind of nice. So you can both install them here as well as manage and uninstall them from here. So yeah, gives you a lot of flexibility, right? You can have debs, you can have Flatpak, snaps. You should be able to find pretty much any software you want, with all those packaging formats at your disposal. Or you can just remove snap altogether. Really not a big deal. Um, I do have to say though, where I really see snaps as useful and kind of my use case for them is on the server, as well as for certain apps, especially developer focused apps like programming languages, for example, like let's see, Go. Canonical's packaged this up. Instead of me going and, running a shell script from the internet and installing it, I can just pop it in here. I don't have to worry about adding it to the path, things like that. So they have a nice one for Go. They have a nice one for Rust, both of which I've added, and you can get up and running on a development box really quickly. And then, like I said, automatically added to path. So, you know, Go version, you see it's already there, ready to go. So that's really nice for kind of like a development rig, developer setup. Snaps can actually be pretty useful, much more useful than Flatpak, which you really have to do a lot of workarounds for things like IDEs and system level stuff. It's just not the right use case for Flatpak. Um, okay, so that's one particular use case. The other one that I see is on the server. So you wouldn't be using the App Center most likely there, but just to kind of give you a visual, for example, Nextcloud has a really nice, I think it's official or at the very least is like a well-regarded community snap for the Nextcloud server. So this is kind of where I see the use case for snaps. I have this running on my home server. Um, pull that up here. And yeah, it's really quite good, quite useful. It's essentially it's a lot better than obviously installing Nextcloud manually on your own server, which requires a lot of config. It's pretty brittle, and you kind of have to dedicate yourself to it. Um, might be the best case for like a professional enterprise grade installation, but just for home use, it's either that or you use the official Docker container, Docker image. But the problem with that is that's actually not set up for home use. You have to really do some serious workarounds and troubleshooting to get that to work with a self-signed certificate. So I really just find that to be such a bear. Whereas the Nextcloud Snap is literally just plug and play, just a few commands on your server, you're up and running. You've got a great, actually like pretty well tuned and efficient and performant installation of Nextcloud ready to go. And it's really easy to upgrade. It's very easy to back up and restore and migrate. So just have to say, I think really the big use case for snaps is on the server, I have to say. So I can kind of see their value there. And I really think, especially like in the enterprise, they're useful along with Ubuntu Pro and that extended support. So just wanted to say, like, I see what Ubuntu is doing here. Now, on the desktop, not a huge fan of snaps just because of kind of some of the issues I've mentioned. Certain things are annoying, like, if I'm going to use app from the command line and I want to install Firefox or something like Gnome boxes, it tries to give me a snap instead of the apt package. And I don't like that. I prefer if I'm using the command line and trying to install something with apt, I would like to just be able to do that and not have the system get in my way. Obviously, I can work around it, but just a preference thing. I can kind of see some of the critiques and negative feedback there. So, gotta say, there's truth on both sides. Snaps are awesome; they've got uses, but um, some of the critiques you read on Reddit and other places, they are valid to some degree. Yeah. So, in conclusion, I have to say I recommend Ubuntu 24.10 or even 24.04, especially for new users, but really for anyone. If you just want like a set it and forget it distro that's really streamlined, it's GTK is super well integrated. It's slick, very nice user experience. Generally just works, but still it doesn't dumb things down. It lets you kind of get under the hood if you want. You can remove snap if that's a problem for you. And then Just from like an LTS perspective, a support perspective, what Ubuntu's doing with the Ubuntu Pro program, if you're not familiar with it, if you sign up, it's a free account. It's not mandatory by any means. You get 10 years of free support for up to 5 machines for a non-paid free personal account. That's pretty insane. That's for the LTS version, so that would be more for 2404. But still, very generous. If you just want to set someone up with a nice open source operating system, they can use it for 10 years without having to worry about it. Honestly, super generous. But yeah, I think overall, it's just kind of amongst the free software community, you have to tip your hat to Ubuntu. They've been a champion of free software. They're constantly kind of driving it forward, sharing other things with the community, giving back. Um, I'm really impressed. And one thing we can do to kind of test its basedness is open up a shell connection to another server and see what greets us. That's how you know it's based.